There comes a moment when life stops pretending to be gentle. The noise gets louder, the pressure tightens, and your thoughts begin to turn against you. You look around and nothing feels stable anymore. Relationships shift, routines collapse, plans fall apart, and the world keeps pulling you in every direction at once. You try to hold on, but the more you cling, the more everything slips through your fingers. And in that exact moment, right where you think you're losing control, you're actually standing at the doorway of the deepest Buddhist teaching. Peace does not arrive when life becomes calm. Peace arrives when you stop demanding the world to behave the way you want. Chaos is not the enemy. The question is simple. Can you stay still while everything around you moves, or will you allow the movement to decide who you become? 1. The storm outside is not the storm inside. Chaos becomes unbearable only when your mind begins to imitate it. The world has never been predictable, not for a single generation. Nature shifts, societies rise and fall, relationships evolve, plans collapse, and life keeps moving whether you're ready or not. The external world is made of change. It was never meant to give you perfect stability. But the real suffering begins the moment you internalize the movement around you and let the outside storm become an inside storm. You end up fighting two battles, one with the situation itself, and the far more damaging one with the thoughts you create about it. Most people underestimate how quickly the mind can turn a small problem into a dramatic catastrophe. The mind doesn't just respond to reality, it amplifies it, exaggerates it, narrates it, and drags you into layers of unnecessary suffering. The event might happen once, but your mind will replay it 100 times. That replay, those loops of fear, regret, and imagined outcomes, is where the storm grows stronger than the actual situation. Buddhism points out that pain is caused by the world, but suffering is caused by the mind. In other words, the outside world may shake you for a moment, but the inside world is what drowns you. Think about the last time you faced something stressful. Maybe someone said something hurtful, a plan fell apart, or an unexpected setback hit you. The event itself was real, but what did the mind do afterward? It created stories. It added assumptions, judgments, predictions, fears, or worst-case scenarios. The mind doesn't simply observe, it layers meaning on everything. Suddenly, a single event turns into, "This always happens to me," "Life is unfair," "Nothing ever works," or "What if it gets worse?" Notice how none of those conclusions actually came from reality. They came from the storm in your thoughts. This is why two people can go through the same chaos, yet experience completely different levels of suffering. One person feels shaken but handles the situation with clarity. The other person gets swallowed by panic, dread, and overthinking. The difference was not the event. The difference was the mind responding to the event. The storm outside was the same. The storm inside wasn't. Buddhism teaches that the mind is like a deep lake. When the surface is disturbed, it looks chaotic, ripples, waves, movement, noise. But underneath, the water is still. Most people live on the surface of their minds, tossed around by every ripple. They believe every thought, react to every emotion, and assume every fear is meaningful. But peace comes from sinking beneath the surface, into that deeper stillness where the chaos above doesn't reach. The lake doesn't need the wind to stop blowing in order to be calm beneath the surface. Your mind doesn't need the world to calm down in order to find peace within. The real problem arises when you don't realize that you have a choice. You assume that if life is chaotic, you must feel chaotic. If someone is angry, you must feel disturbed. If a situation becomes uncertain, you must fear the future. But this assumption is wrong. Chaos outside does not automatically create chaos inside. You create that connection by identifying with every thought that appears. When you allow the mind to run unchecked, it behaves like a wildfire. One spark becomes a burning forest. A single worry becomes a chain of fears. A moment of stress becomes a full emotional collapse. The mind becomes loud enough that you can't hear your own life clearly anymore. Peace begins when you stop feeding the fire. The world will always provide sparks, problems, changes, unexpected events. But it's your reaction, the thoughts you entertain, the stories you attach to, the fears you allow to run wild, that determines whether those sparks turn into flames. You cannot stop the world from being unpredictable, but you can stop giving your mind permission to turn unpredictability into suffering. One of the simplest Buddhist practices for this is simply to notice the first moment of chaos inside you. Notice the moment your chest tightens, your breath shortens, your thoughts speed up. That first moment is when the outside world tries to push its way into your inner world. If you catch it early, you can stop it before it takes over. You can pause, you can return to your breath. You can observe the thought without believing it. You can let the emotion arise without panicking about it. These small shifts prevent the storm from entering you. And here's the truth most people resist. Your mind does not need the world to calm down. It needs you to stop feeding it fear. The mind becomes chaotic not because chaos exists, but because you keep giving it energy. Every time you replay a problem in your head, you strengthen the storm. Every time you imagine the worst outcome, you strengthen the storm. Every time you believe a fear without questioning it, you strengthen the storm. Peace is not the absence of external noise, it is the absence of internal fuel. This is why monks can remain calm in environments far more chaotic than your daily life. Their surroundings don't shape their state. Their state shapes how they move through their surroundings. They don't look for stillness, they create it. They don't wait for life to behave, they train their mind to remain untouched. The world may be loud, but their mind doesn't echo that noise. This is the difference between being reactive and being aware. You are not meant to eliminate the storm outside. That's impossible. But you are absolutely capable of keeping the storm outside from entering your inner space. Once you understand this, your entire relationship with chaos changes. You stop trying to control everything around you, and you begin learning how to control the only thing that's ever been fully yours, your mind. And when your inner world becomes steady, the outer world loses its ability to overwhelm you. Chaos becomes something you witness rather than something you become. That is the heart of this lesson. The storm outside is real, but the storm inside is optional. 2. Pain is inevitable, but panic is learned. Pain is part of being human. Losing people, losing stability, losing plans, losing control, these moments are guaranteed. No amount of spiritual practice, intelligence, or strength can shield you from the basic reality that life will wound you. Pain arrives without asking your permission. It comes through endings, disappointments, illness, betrayal, change, and uncertainty. You can live wisely, compassionately, and mindfully, and you will still experience tone. That is the nature of life. But the part that destroys people, the part that turns pain into full-blown chaos, is not the pain itself. It's the panic that the mind adds on top of the pain. Panic is not natural. Panic is learned. And because it is learned, it can be unlearned. Most people never notice how quickly their mind jumps from a difficult moment to a mental spiral. The pain appears first, the event, the emotion, the shock. But right after that, something else starts growing. Fear of what it means, fear of what will come next, fear of the consequences, fear of losing more. A single painful moment becomes an entire chain of imagined disasters. You experience something real once, and then you suffer mentally 100 times after it. The panic becomes larger than the pain. The reaction becomes larger than the reality. The mind doesn't just respond, it catastrophizes. Imagine touching something hot. The pain is real, clear, immediate. But now imagine your mind reacts by screaming, "This will never heal. My hand is ruined. My life is falling apart. Something worse must be coming," or "I can't handle this." Those sentences have nothing to do with the actual burn. They come from the mind's fear of the pain, not the pain itself. And this is how most people live. They are not overwhelmed by the moment. They are overwhelmed by the story they build around the moment. Buddhism makes a sharp distinction between the first arrow and the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain life gives you, unavoidable, sudden, often surprising. The second arrow is the one you shoot into yourself by reacting with panic, exaggeration, fear, and mental storytelling. You cannot avoid the first arrow, but almost all of your suffering comes from the second, and that second arrow is always optional. Look at any stressful situation in your life. The pain was real, but the panic was learned. You learned it from childhood, from unstable environments, from watching others panic, from unresolved fears in your mind, from imagining danger where there was none. Panic is simply the mind acting without training. It's the unexamined habit of assuming the worst. And because it is a habit, it grows stronger every time you give in to it. The mind becomes conditioned to fear itself. What makes panic so destructive is how fast it spreads. Pain stays where it is in the moment. Panic turns into a story about your entire life. Pain tells you something happened. Panic tells you everything is falling apart. Pain says, "This hurts." Panic says, "I am not safe. I am not capable. I am losing control. I cannot survive this." Panic builds a fictional future where every fear becomes reality. Under panic, your mind runs faster than the truth. People think they are suffering from the situation, but most of the time they are suffering from their thoughts about the situation. That's why two people can face the same painful event, yet one feels steady and the other collapses emotionally. It's not because the event was different, it's because their reactions were different. One felt the first arrow and stopped there. The other unleashed a storm of second arrows on themselves. Once you see this clearly, you understand something important. Inner peace is not about eliminating pain. It's about not allowing your mind to turn pain into panic. Pain demands to be felt, that's natural. Panic demands to be fed, that's a choice. The mind only spirals when you let it run unattended. So how do you stop panic from rising? Not by forcing calm, and not by pretending you aren't hurting. Panic ends when you refuse to build a story around the pain. You see the moment as it is. You feel the hurt, but you don't attach fear to it. You acknowledge the uncertainty, but you don't create a narrative about future disasters. You breathe through it instead of fighting it. You observe your thoughts instead of believing every one. You let the emotion pass through your body without adding layers of meaning. Pain moves through you. Panic roots itself inside you. Don't give it roots. This is why awareness is such a powerful tool. When you become aware of your mind's habits, the panic loses its grip. You start noticing the exact moment when your thoughts begin exaggerating. You recognize the familiar tone of catastrophe thinking. You notice how fast one fear invites 10 more. Instead of being dragged by it, you stop and observe it like a witness. A thought appears, but you don't chase it. An emotion rises, but you don't assume it defines you. Panic feeds on unconsciousness. Awareness starves it. You'll begin to see clearly. The situation may be difficult, but the real suffering is created by the mind's refusal to allow the moment to be what it is. When you separate the pain from the panic, the chaos becomes manageable. Your emotions feel less threatening. Your mind feels less wild. You don't drown in the moment because you aren't adding mental waves to the water. And there is freedom in this. When you stop fueling panic, life becomes simpler, not easier but clearer. You realize you can face life without collapsing under it. You learn to sit with discomfort without imagining your entire future collapsing. You discover you are stronger than your fear has led you to believe. And slowly, you begin to trust yourself again. Pain is temporary. Panic is a habit. And once you break the habit, the storms of life lose the power they once had over you. Pain will visit you throughout your life. But panic? Panic only stays if you keep opening the door. 3. You suffer more from attachment than from chaos. Almost everything that breaks you inside isn't the chaos itself. It's your attachment to how you believe life should be. The world changes, people change, circumstances shift, and nothing stays still for long. Yet you build expectations, routines, identities, and emotional anchors, and assume they will remain exactly the way you want them to. When reality inevitably moves, you don't just feel the change, you feel the tearing of your attachment. The pain comes not from what happened, but from the invisible grip you had on how things were supposed to happen. Attachment is subtle. It hides in your desires, in your preferences, in your fears, and in your sense of self. You attach to people, to outcomes, to images of yourself, to the way things used to be, and to stories you've carried for years. You attach to comfort and call it security. You attach to patterns and call them your personality. You attach to expectations and call them standards. And when any of these shift or fall apart, you interpret the change as suffering. In truth, the suffering was built long before the change it was built, the moment you decided you could not be okay without something staying exactly the way you wanted. Chaos is not the problem. Chaos is natural. What makes chaos painful is your insistence that it shouldn't be happening. Your attachment creates friction, and friction creates suffering. This is why two people can go through the same loss, the same breakup, the same disappointment, the same uncertainty, yet one remains centered while the other falls apart. The difference is not strength. The difference is grip. One person allows life to move the way it wants to, while the other tries to freeze life in a shape that no longer exists. Attachment is the mind's attempt to control the uncontrollable. You build emotional walls around people and think they will stay. You create mental scripts about how your plans should unfold. You attach your worth to achievements, and the moment life interrupts your plan, you feel like your identity is collapsing. But the truth is ruthless. The world has never once promised you that things will go your way. Everything you cling to is temporary, yet you behave as if holding tighter will make it permanent. When you cling to the impermanent, suffering is guaranteed. Look at your biggest struggles right now. You're not suffering because life changed. You're suffering because you didn't want it to. You're suffering because you believed a relationship would last forever. You're suffering because you believed a phase of life would continue. You're suffering because you believed your expectations were owed fulfillment. But expectations are just silent agreements you made with yourself. Life never signed them. Attachment is also rooted in fear, fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear of emptiness, fear of being without what you've grown used to. So when chaos hits, you don't feel only the change, you feel the terror of not knowing who you are without the thing you clung to. This fear tightens your mind, narrows your awareness, and convinces you that survival depends on holding on even tighter. But the tighter you hold, the more suffering you create. Like gripping a rope that's being pulled away, your hands bleed not because the rope is harmful, but because you refuse to let go. Buddhism doesn't teach detachment as apathy or emotional numbness. It teaches detachment as freedom, the freedom to experience life without demanding it to follow your script. Detachment is the ability to love without possessing, to care without controlling, to enjoy without clinging. When you detach, you don't withdraw from life. You simply stop choking it with your expectations. You allow everything to move as it must, and you move with it instead of fighting it. You begin to understand that peace comes from flexibility, not from strictness. When you loosen your grip, something interesting happens. The chaos becomes less personal. You no longer take every shift as a threat. You stop interpreting every change as a loss of self. You stop feeling betrayed by impermanence. Instead, you begin to see life as fluid and yourself as capable of adapting. You realize that your identity isn't tied to any specific outcome, person, or phase. It's tied to your ability to remain aware and steady no matter what changes. This shift doesn't eliminate pain. Letting go is painful because you are dismantling the illusions you've lived inside. But letting go prevents pain from turning into prolonged suffering. For example, losing someone hurts. But believing your life is meaningless without them, that's attachment. Failing at something hurts. But believing failure defines you, that's attachment. Facing uncertainty hurts. But insisting on predicting the future, that's attachment. The pain is human. The suffering is optional. Once you recognize this, you begin to observe your attachments with clarity. You notice the tension in your mind when something doesn't go your way. You notice the panic that arises when someone pulls away. You notice the frustration when plans fall apart. These reactions reveal exactly where your attachments are, and seeing them is the first step to softening them. You don't have to force yourself to let go immediately. You just have to notice how tightly you're holding on. The more you observe, the more you understand. The chaos outside is nothing compared to the chaos created by attachment. The moment you release your grip, life becomes lighter. The world becomes less threatening. Your inner space opens up. You start to feel grounded even in uncertainty because you stop needing everything to be predictable. You move from resisting life to flowing with it. And in this flow, peace becomes possible not because life calms down, but because you no longer turn impermanence into suffering. Attachment is the quiet architect of your inner storms. Release it, and the chaos loses its power. In letting go, you don't lose life. You simply stop losing yourself to it. 4. Stillness is a skill. You practice, not a mood you wait for. Most people misunderstand peace completely. They think stillness is something that appears when life becomes gentle, when problems disappear, when people behave, when the world slows down enough to give them a break. They imagine calm as a mood that shows up once the chaos outside stops shaking their life. But that belief is exactly why they never find it. If your inner peace depends on perfect timing, predictable outcomes, or a quiet world, then you haven't found peace, you've found a temporary pause. And pauses don't sustain you. They vanish the moment life resumes its natural messiness. Stillness isn't something you stumble into. It's not a gift from the outside world. It's not a personality trait. It's not luck. Stillness is a discipline, a committed practice, a skill that is built slowly, deliberately, and often painfully. It's a form of mental training that must be strengthened the same way a muscle is. And like any skill, if you don't practice it when things are hard, you won't have it when you need it. People believe they will feel calm once their circumstances settle. But circumstances don't settle. Life doesn't wait for your mental peace before moving. Life doesn't pause out of kindness. Life doesn't ask if you're ready. Instead, it keeps shifting, surprising, challenging, and sometimes overwhelming you. If you don't learn to remain still while things are chaotic, then you will always be dependent on the environment to determine your emotional state. That's not peace, that's instability, wearing the mask of calm. The truth is uncomfortable. The moments when you least want to practice stillness are the moments when practicing it matters the most. Anyone can be calm on a peaceful morning. Anyone can be centered when everything is going right. Anyone can breathe deeply when their schedule is clear and their emotions are steady. But when someone disappoints you, when plans fall apart, when you feel judged, when you feel uncertain, when stress storms in, those are the moments that reveal whether stillness is truly yours or just a borrowed state you enter by accident. Buddhism teaches that the mind behaves like a wild animal when untrained. It jumps from thought to thought. It reacts before it understands. It interprets everything as threat or opportunity. It magnifies fear and dismisses clarity. This chaotic mind cannot be calmed through wishing. It can only be calmed through training. Meditation isn't about sitting quietly with eyes closed. It's learning to notice your own mind without being controlled by it. It's learning to return to your breath even when 100 distracting thoughts try to pull you away. It's learning to see your emotions rise and fall without grabbing onto them. Stillness is not the absence of thoughts or emotions. It's the ability to remain unmoved by them. Think of a tree in a strong wind. The branches sway, the leaves shake, the air howls, but the trunk stays rooted. That is stillness. Not the absence of movement, but the presence of something deeper that doesn't get carried away. Your thoughts may swirl, your emotions may spike, your heart may race, but if the core of you remains steady, aware, grounded, present, then you are practicing real stillness. What makes stillness powerful is how it changes your relationship with life. When you react instantly, you act from panic, ego, or old wounds. But when you respond from stillness, you act from clarity. You make decisions that aren't shaped by fear or anger. You see people as they are, not as your assumptions paint them. You see situations without exaggeration or distortion. Stillness gives you a moment between stimulus and response, a moment where you choose who you will be instead of letting your past habits decide for you. And here's the brutal truth. If your peace disappears the moment discomfort arrives, then it was never peace, it was convenience. Real stillness is built in the middle of your discomfort, not outside it. It's built when your thoughts are loud but you refuse to chase them. It's built when someone irritates you and you resist the urge to react. It's built when fear spikes but you don't let it dictate your next move. It's built when you pause before speaking, before judging, before assuming, before panicking. Every pause is a piece of training. Every moment you choose awareness over reaction is a moment you strengthen your inner stillness. And it will feel unnatural at first. It will feel frustrating, slow, even impossible. The mind doesn't like discipline. It prefers chaos because chaos feels familiar. But training the mind is no different from training the body. Consistency beats intensity. You don't need a dramatic transformation. You need subtle, repeated moments of awareness. You need to choose presence hundreds of times in ordinary moments so that you can choose it once in a crisis without collapsing. Eventually, you begin to notice something change inside you. Problems that once triggered instant panic now create only a small ripple. Noise that once overwhelmed you now passes through you without sticking. Emotional storms that used to consume you now fade faster. You find yourself watching your mind instead of being dragged by it. The world remains chaotic, but it no longer defines your inner state. You move through life with a sense of groundedness that others can feel, even if they don't understand it. This is the essence of stillness, not silence, not emptiness, not passivity, but mastery. Mastery of your attention, mastery of your reactions, mastery of the space inside you where peace can either be built or destroyed. Stillness is a choice you make again and again, especially when choosing it feels impossible. Over time, the practice becomes your default. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that life's chaos was never the true enemy. Your untrained mind was. Once your mind is trained, chaos becomes just another part of the landscape, not something that shakes the core of who you are. Stillness is not something you wait for, it's something you create. And once you create it, no one, not people, not problems, not storms, can easily take it away. 5. Chaos reveals the parts of you that still need work. People treat chaos like it's an attack, as if life is intentionally targeting them, punishing them, or trying to break them. But Buddhism flips that perspective completely. Chaos is not an enemy, it's a mirror. It reflects the parts of your mind, heart, and identity that have been left unexamined, unhealed, or ignored. The moment life becomes chaotic, the truth of who you are becomes visible. It shows you the fears you hide, the insecurities you deny, the wounds you pretend are healed, the impatience you disguise as strength, and the control you justify as responsibility. Chaos doesn't invent your weaknesses, it simply uncovers the ones already living inside you. Think about how relaxed you are on days when everything goes your way. You feel patient, kind, composed, forgiving, even wise. But that peace is fragile. It's conditional, dependent on external comfort. When chaos hits, that temporary peace collapses instantly, revealing the true quality of your inner world. If a small inconvenience pushes you into anger, that anger was already there. If a moment of uncertainty triggers panic, that fear was already there. If someone's behavior instantly shakes your confidence, that insecurity was already there. Chaos doesn't plant these emotions in you, it exposes them. And exposure is uncomfortable because you can no longer pretend they aren't there. This is why chaos is such an effective teacher. It targets the exact parts of you that remain unresolved. Impatience, chaos brings delays. Ego, chaos brings situations that humble you. Attachment, chaos forces change. Fear, chaos removes certainty. Control issues, chaos makes things unpredictable. Emotional avoidance, chaos brings feelings you can't escape. Life doesn't target you maliciously. It simply responds to the truths you've tried to suppress. When something inside you is rigid, reality will test it until it cracks, not to destroy you, but to show you that flexibility is necessary. Most people don't want to see this. They would rather blame circumstances, people, fate, or bad luck than acknowledge the possibility that the real battlefield is inside them. It is easier to say, "This situation is overwhelming," than to say, "My mind isn't trained enough to handle this." But Buddhism demands honesty. You cannot grow if you keep defending your weaknesses. You cannot evolve if you keep protecting the parts of yourself that create suffering. You cannot find peace if you keep avoiding the shadows inside you. Chaos is the light that makes those shadows visible. You can either complain about the glare or use it to finally see what needs to be healed. Look at the moments in life when you felt the most shaken. Maybe it was a breakup, a betrayal, the loss of a job, a period of uncertainty, or sudden change. What did it reveal? Did it expose how easily your self-worth depends on someone's approval? Did it reveal how terrified you are of being alone? Did it show you how much of your identity depends on external achievements? Did it expose how quickly your mind spirals into fear? Did it reveal how deeply you depend on routines or control to feel safe? These revelations are uncomfortable, but they are precious. Without them, you can spend years living inside illusions about yourself. Chaos strips away illusions. It removes the protective layer you present to the world and even to yourself. It forces you to confront the truth of your maturity, your emotional regulation, your resilience, your compassion, and your inner balance. And here's the paradox. The versions of you that chaos exposes are not failures. They are invitations. If you feel triggered easily, it is an invitation to explore that trigger. If fear consumes you quickly, it is an invitation to build courage. If anger rises too fast, it is an invitation to soften the ego. If attachment tightens your chest, it is an invitation to understand where your sense of identity has been misplaced. Chaos is not punishing you. It is pointing to the exact internal knot that needs untying. There is a silent intelligence in how life reveals your weaknesses. When you're ready to grow but refuse to move, life shakes the ground beneath your feet. When you cling too tightly to something temporary, life pulls it away. When you hold on to habits that harm you, life creates discomfort. When you avoid emotional wounds, life creates situations that press directly on them. Without these moments, you would stay stuck in old patterns forever. Chaos may feel like destruction, but often it is clearing a space that you were too afraid to clear yourself. But this requires a certain mindset, the willingness to look inward before pointing outward. When chaos hits, most people lash out, blame others, or collapse into self-pity. Few pause long enough to ask the real question, what part of me is this chaos trying to show me? That question alone changes everything. Instead of feeling attacked, you begin to feel awakened. Instead of feeling like a victim, you begin to feel like a student. Instead of running from discomfort, you learn from it. This shift from resistance to curiosity is the beginning of wisdom. And once you start examining the parts of yourself that chaos exposes, you gain a new kind of strength. You become less reactive, less triggered, less afraid. You understand yourself more deeply. You learn to recognize your patterns before they control you. You stop being surprised by your own emotions. You start responding to life instead of reacting blindly. And slowly, you begin to realize something empowering. Chaos didn't break you. It introduced you to yourself. The world doesn't get easier. People don't get kinder. Life doesn't become predictable. But you become stronger, clearer, more grounded, and more aware. The storms keep coming, but you stop collapsing at the first sign of wind. You begin to trust your ability to withstand disruption. You begin to feel rooted even when everything around you shifts. This is the hidden purpose of chaos, not to crush you, but to prepare you. It sharpens you, tests you, reveals you, and ultimately transforms you into someone who is not scared of life anymore. Chaos is a mirror. Look into it long enough, and you don't just see the parts of you that need work. You see the person you're capable of becoming once you do the work. 6. Acceptance is not surrender, it's mastery. People hear the word acceptance and instantly assume it means giving up, lowering standards, or allowing life to walk all over them. They imagine acceptance as passivity, weakness, or resignation. But that misunderstanding is exactly why most people remain trapped in suffering. Acceptance is not surrender. It is not defeat. It is not allowing chaos to control you. Acceptance is mastery, the quiet, disciplined ability to see reality without distortion and move through it without being emotionally destroyed. It is one of the highest forms of strength because it demands clarity, humility, and deep self-control. Most suffering doesn't come from what happens. It comes from the mind's refusal to allow what's already happening to simply be. You resist. You argue with reality. You cling to old versions of life. You demand situations to follow your expectations. You insist that people behave according to the rules you've created in your head. You replay the past as if it could change. You panic about the future as if worrying will guarantee safety. And in doing so, you fight a war you cannot win. Reality always wins. Acceptance isn't losing the fight. Acceptance is putting down the sword when you finally realize the fight was against yourself. The reason acceptance feels uncomfortable is because ego hates it. The ego wants everything to bend to its desires. It wants control. It wants predictability. It wants comfort. It wants things to match the images it has built. When something breaks those images, when someone leaves, when plans collapse, when life changes, the ego panics. It interprets acceptance as humiliation, as a blow to its imagined authority over the world. That's why the ego prefers denial, anger, resistance, or blame. These reactions feel powerful, but they drain you. They make you rigid in a world that demands adaptability. Acceptance is the opposite. Acceptance is flexibility. It's the ability to move with life instead of against it. A river does not push against rocks, it flows around them, and because of that, it never stops moving. Acceptance is that same fluidity applied to the mind. You navigate what is, instead of exhausting yourself imagining what should be. It doesn't mean you stop trying, caring, or improving. It means you no longer waste energy resisting the present moment. You deal with what's in front of you with clarity instead of emotional distortion. Consider how much suffering comes from refusal. You refuse to accept that someone has changed, and you cling to an outdated version of them. You refuse to accept that a phase of life has ended, and you hold on to a past that's already gone. You refuse to accept uncertainty, and you drown yourself in anxiety trying to control outcomes that aren't in your hands. You refuse to accept your own emotions, and you bury them until they turn toxic. Think of how much energy you lose fighting what already exists. Acceptance gives that energy back. Acceptance is not passive, it's precise. It says, I will stop wasting strength resisting reality, and I will start using that strength to respond wisely. When you accept a difficult reality, you free up the mental space to do something about it. Acceptance gives you options. Resistance blinds you to them. This is why acceptance creates emotional intelligence. When you accept your emotions, you understand them instead of battling them. When you accept your circumstances, you navigate them instead of running from them. When you accept that you can't control people, you stop tying your happiness to their behavior. Acceptance doesn't weaken your boundaries, it clarifies them. It doesn't make you passive, it makes you intentional. It doesn't tell you to tolerate everything. It teaches you to see the truth without drowning in it. Here is the part most people avoid. Acceptance requires honesty, brutal, unfiltered honesty. It forces you to acknowledge truths your ego denied truths about people, situations, and yourself. It may require admitting you were wrong, misled, overly attached, or resistant to change. It may require acknowledging that something is over. It may require admitting you cannot control what you desperately wanted to control. That honesty is painful at first, but it's liberating in the long run. Honesty breaks illusions, and illusions are where suffering hides. When you learn acceptance, uncertainty stops feeling like a threat. You stop demanding guarantees from life. You stop assuming that everything unfamiliar is dangerous. You stop believing that control equals safety. You begin to trust your ability to handle things even when you don't know what comes next. This shift is powerful. It turns chaos into information. It turns setbacks into lessons. It turns change into growth. Most importantly, acceptance makes you emotionally durable. Life can change overnight, but you don't collapse with it. People can disappoint you, but you don't unravel. Plans can fail, but you don't lose yourself. Acceptance stabilizes your inner world, so the outer world doesn't pull you apart. It gives you the ability to bend without breaking. And bending is not weakness, it's wisdom. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize that peace doesn't come from controlling reality, it comes from cooperating with it. That is the moment acceptance becomes a source of power. You stop taking everything personally. You stop forcing life to follow your script. You stop fighting battles that drain your spirit. You become lighter, clearer, calmer, and more intentional. The world doesn't overwhelm you because you aren't fighting it anymore. You're moving with it, learning from it, adapting to it, and making choices from awareness instead of fear. Acceptance is not surrender. Surrender is the collapse that happens when you cannot handle pressure. Acceptance is the strength that grows when you understand that resisting reality only weakens you. Acceptance is not passivity, it is presence. It is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is not defeat, it is evolution. And once you learn it deeply, chaos loses its bite, not because the world becomes calmer, but because you finally stop battling the inevitable and start mastering the moment you are in. 7. Peace is found in returning to yourself, not escaping the world. Most people believe peace is something they must find somewhere far away, someplace quieter, calmer, simpler, or isolated from the messiness of life. They imagine peace exists in a forest, a mountain, a retreat, a temple, a new city, a new relationship, or a new beginning. They dream of running away to escape the noise, the stress, the people, the responsibilities, and most of all, the constant thoughts inside their own mind. But the truth is brutally simple. You can run as far as you want, but you will always take yourself with you. If you don't know how to return to yourself, no place in the world can give you peace. And if you do know how to return to yourself, even the busiest, loudest, most chaotic environments cannot steal that peace from you. The world is not what disturbs you. The world only triggers the restlessness already living inside you. Chaos outside doesn't create chaos inside, it only exposes it. And this is why escaping never works, not geographically, not emotionally, not mentally. You can change the environment, but if your internal state remains untouched, the same patterns of fear, stress, and overthinking will appear everywhere you go. They might be quiet for a moment, but they will always resurface. You don't heal by escaping life. You heal by returning to your center again and again until that return becomes natural, grounded, and unavoidable. Returning to yourself means coming back to the part of you that is deeper than your reactions, deeper than your fears, deeper than your judgments, and deeper than your temporary emotions. It is the home within you that remains calm, even when your thoughts are loud. It is the awareness behind the noise. But most people are so entangled in their thoughts that they forget this inner space exists. They live in a loop of reaction, reacting to people, to stress, to emotions, to memories, to triggers, to expectations, to disappointments. Every reaction pulls them further away from themselves until they become strangers to their own awareness. Buddhism teaches that the mind is like a sky. Thoughts are clouds, they come, they go, they change shape, they pass. Emotions are storms, they rise suddenly, they thunder, and eventually they dissolve. Life events are seasons, they shift, they challenge, they transform. But the sky itself, the awareness behind everything, remains untouched. Returning to yourself means returning to the sky, not the clouds. It means remembering that your thoughts are temporary, but your consciousness is steady. It means remembering that emotions can overwhelm, but they cannot define you. It means remembering that the world will always move, but you don't have to be carried away with it. When you forget this inner sky, you become reactive. You believe every thought. You fear every emotion. You internalize every problem. You mistake temporary storms for permanent truths. You identify with everything that arises in your mind, and in that identification, you lose yourself. You become a character inside the storm, rather than the one who watches the storm. Returning to yourself is stepping out of the storm and into the position of the observer. It's remembering that awareness is always bigger than the momentary experience. And here's the part most people avoid. Returning to yourself often feels uncomfortable at first. Not because the inner space is unpleasant, but because it requires facing the things you ran from. Silence exposes your mental habits. Stillness reveals your fears. Awareness shows you the patterns you've been avoiding, your attachments, your insecurities, your overthinking, your emotional wounds. This is why many people prefer distraction over presence. It feels easier to stay busy than to sit with the truth. But the peace you're looking for cannot be found in distraction. You cannot heal what you constantly outrun. Returning to yourself means sitting with your discomfort until it loses its power. It means noticing your thoughts without chasing them. It means watching your emotions rise and fall without assuming they are permanent. It means letting the mind settle on its own, rather than forcing it into silence. When you return to yourself, you begin to realize that most of your suffering didn't come from life. It came from your disconnection, from your inner calm. And something profound happens once this return becomes a habit. You stop being controlled by the external world. Situations that used to shake you barely touch you. Stressful environments no longer alter your inner state. People's words lose their power to disrupt your peace. You stop absorbing emotions that don't belong to you. You stop trying to regulate life and start regulating your own attention. You become rooted in yourself, not in circumstances. The chaos outside becomes background noise, not a personal threat. This is what monks train for years, not to escape the world, but to return to themselves so deeply that the world cannot pull them away. They learn that peace is an inner position, not an outer condition. They meditate in forests, but they also meditate in crowds. Their practice doesn't depend on silence. It depends on presence. And presence is something you carry within you everywhere. Returning to yourself doesn't mean isolating yourself from responsibilities or people. It means coming back to awareness even while living fully in the world. You work, but you don't lose yourself in work. You love, but you don't dissolve into attachment. You feel emotions, but you don't become controlled by them. You face challenges, but you don't collapse under them. You remain stable not because life is easy, but because you are no longer drifting away from your inner center. And here is the most freeing truth of all. Peace is not something you achieve once. It's something you return to repeatedly, 100 times a day, sometimes 1,000. Each return strengthens your inner foundation. Each moment of awareness becomes a brick in your internal temple. Eventually, the return becomes natural. Your mind begins to settle faster. Your emotions pass more quickly. Your thoughts lose their grip. The world becomes less threatening. Life becomes less heavy. Peace is not outside you. It never was. It's not in a place, not in a person, not in a moment of perfect circumstances. Peace is the quiet home within you, the one you forget, abandon, ignore, or run from. But the moment you turn inward, the moment you breathe, the moment you observe instead of react, that home opens again. And the more often you return, the more you realize. The world never had the power to steal your peace. You simply drifted away from yourself. Return, and the chaos becomes something you walk through, not something you become. 8. You don't control life. You only control the space within you. One of the deepest sources of human suffering is the belief that life should obey your expectations. You expect people to treat you a certain way. You expect plans to unfold smoothly. You expect your efforts to guarantee results. You expect comfort, predictability, and fairness. You expect control. And every time life violates one of these expectations, and it always will, you feel shaken, betrayed, confused, or angry. But the problem was never life. The problem was the silent assumption that life is supposed to follow your script. Buddhism dismantles this illusion with precision. You control nothing outside yourself, not events, not timing, not outcomes, not other people, not circumstances, not fate, not change. You never have. And yet you spend most of your emotional energy trying to control the uncontrollable. You hold on tighter, you worry more, you plan obsessively, you interpret everything as a sign. You try to manipulate, predict, influence, or force situations. You think the more you tighten your grip, the safer you'll feel. But reality doesn't bend to pressure. It bends to awareness. Life is a river. You can learn to swim within it, but you cannot command its flow. The moment you internalize this truth, not intellectually, but deeply, you feel something shift inside you. A quiet honesty arises. You begin to see clearly. What you can control is so much smaller than you believed, but also so much more powerful than you ever realized. You cannot control the world, but you can control how the world moves through you. You can control the space within you. And that space determines everything: your peace, your clarity, your reactions, your choices, your resilience. When you stop fighting life, you begin to work with it. And that shift is freedom. To control the inner space means taking full responsibility for your own state of mind. It means recognizing that your peace is not dependent on circumstances, but on your relationship with those circumstances. You can't choose every event, but you can choose how much of your mind the event is allowed to occupy. You can't control how people behave, but you can control whether you absorb their chaos or stay centered in your own clarity. You can't stop the world from changing, but you can stop letting change destabilize you. You cannot silence the noise of life, but you can stop letting your mind echo it endlessly. Most people don't realize they are giving away their inner space constantly. They hand it to stress, to triggers, to social pressure, to fear, to disappointment, to past wounds, to imagined futures. They allow every external force to enter their mind unchecked. They become overwhelmed, not because life is overwhelming, but because they never learn to filter what enters their inner world. They don't know where they end and where the world begins. This is why mindfulness is not a trend, it is psychological survival. Mindfulness teaches you to be the gatekeeper of your inner space. It teaches you to see thoughts before believing them. It teaches you to pause before reacting. It teaches you to observe emotions without drowning in them. It teaches you to feel life fully without allowing life to determine your inner state. Awareness is the only true form of control you have, and it is more powerful than controlling circumstances ever could be. Think of the moments when chaos pulled you apart. Did the external event truly destroy you, or did your mind lose its grip? Did someone else's words actually have power, or did your interpretation give them power? Did uncertainty actually cause suffering, or did your mind fill the uncertainty with fear? When you lose control of your inner space, everything outside becomes a threat. But when you reclaim it, nothing outside can dominate you. Inner control is not emotional suppression, it's emotional intelligence. It doesn't mean ignoring pain or pretending not to care. It means seeing clearly what belongs to you and what doesn't. It means allowing emotions to pass without letting them define your identity. It means holding yourself steady, even when the world moves violently. It means choosing your response instead of being possessed by reaction. It means remembering that the only stable ground you will ever have is inside you. And once you master that inner space, something powerful happens. life loses its ability to intimidate you. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop expecting it to be easy. You stop seeking control where it doesn't exist. You stop fighting battles that can't be won. You stop wasting strength on illusions. Instead, you focus on the only territory that has ever been yours, the space between one breath and the next. This shift is transformational. You begin responding to life with wisdom instead of instinct. You notice your patterns and stop repeating them. You handle disappointment without collapsing emotionally. People's behavior no longer defines your mood. Uncertainty no longer feels like danger. Change becomes something you navigate, not something you fear. You become grounded, stable, unshakable, not because life rewards you, but because you no longer hand your inner stability to things you cannot control. Modern suffering comes from trying to manage everything. Ancient wisdom comes from managing yourself. When you truly understand this, you stop running, you stop grasping, you stop forcing. You begin living in alignment with reality rather than fighting it. And that alignment creates peace, not the fragile peace that depends on perfect circumstances, but the unbreakable peace that rises from within. A peace that chaos cannot touch, a peace that people cannot steal, a peace that circumstances cannot shake, a peace that follows you everywhere because it belongs to you, not to the world. You don't need life to obey you. You don't need every situation to unfold smoothly. You don't need perfect timing, perfect outcomes, or perfect conditions. You only need one thing: mastery of the inner space. Once that is yours, everything else becomes manageable. Life will never be fully in your control, but your response to life, the awareness, the steadiness, the clarity, that is where your true power has always lived. And once you claim it, the world stops feeling like an adversary and begins to feel like something you can move through gracefully, no matter how chaotic it becomes. Chaos isn't going anywhere. The world will keep shifting, people will keep changing, and life will continue to unfold in ways you didn't plan. But peace has never been about controlling the movement around you. Peace has always been about mastering the movement within you. Every storm you face is an invitation to come back to yourself, to loosen your grip on expectations, to release the illusions that cause suffering, and to strengthen the awareness that carries you through uncertainty. The storms outside can only break you if your inner world is unprepared. But once you learn to remain rooted, once you train your mind to observe instead of react, once you stop fighting reality and start flowing with it, chaos loses its authority over you. You won't avoid difficulty, you won't escape discomfort, you won't live a life free of change, but you will learn something far more powerful: how to remain steady in the middle of all of it. That steadiness is not found in running away, in resisting, or in controlling. It is found in returning to yourself again and again until that return becomes your natural state. When you find that inner home, the world can move as wildly as it wants, and you will not lose yourself in the motion. That is real peace, not the absence of chaos, but the presence of a mind that no longer fears it.